Are we live? What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. Sorry for the delay. You all can see me, right? Michael Pace, you say it's back. I assume you can see me. Again, welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. We've got our game-by-game preview, and we're doing it with Meg Shoup and Mike McClure. Meg, I'm going to start with you. I just heard from Mike, by the way, that he's in the thick of a ton of best ball drafts. That's got to make you smile even more than how big you were going to smile going into this show.
The smile got even bigger. Absolutely. Great to hear it, Mike, a fellow best ball sicko like me, and I love to hear it. But yeah, happy NFL kickoff to you guys. Great to be back with you guys, to everybody in the chat. This is like kid on Christmas morning vibes. We are back. I feel so alive. I'm so excited.
This is going to be great. We had this trio, Mike, last year at the the end of the season for the playoff run. I'm excited to have us three back. You must be excited to have your Chiefs play the Ravens tonight. And we're going to, at the very end of the show, we're going to touch on just a couple of showdown plays or maybe roster constructions that you are interested in. But how excited are you 1 to 10?
That would be an 11 for sure. It does not get any better than this day, opening night. And then just the beauty of the way NFL did the schedule this year. I know we're not going to touch on it today, but we got another standalone primetime game tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And then we got college football Saturday, NFL Sunday, Monday Night Football. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, you know what's interesting too? I noticed on DraftKings today that they had the afternoon slate is finally out, which is great, the 4-game afternoon slate. But they didn't do on DraftKings the 2-game Friday, Thursday thing, which actually was a little disappointing to me because I happen to love those slates. But that's okay. We got a couple of showdown slates, a couple of great games of football. I do want to mention everybody that's in here. I see you, Jess Dabbs, T. Martin, Metrius Lloyd, Des Morris, Jay Metz, Reed Phillips, everybody hit the like button if you could, and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Hello, Josh Lucero and Stevie and Thomas. Thank you, Jeffrey Lightsey. Thank you, Grey Goose Hayes. Thanks for being in here. Let's get started because we got to go game by game. I do want to mention that our FFT DFS contest is live. It will be in the YouTube and podcast description. I also tweeted it out yesterday, and I'll tweet it out again. I got to it kind of late in terms of getting it out, so it's not even close to filled. So get in that contest. It's only $5. All right, let's get it started. I don't see any reason to wait. Jaguars at the Dolphins. It's about a 49-point total. As you know, these totals and these lines will shift ever so slightly, but this is a high total. Mike, I'm going to start with you. We've got the Jaguars as 3.5-point dogs going into Miami. Is this a game that you're targeting?
It is. I'm going to start with the obvious play here. It's going to be Tyreek Hill. And anytime you've got Tyreek Hill on a slate, particularly early in the season where value is able to be had, particularly at the quarterback position, it frees up roster constructions to lock in one of the best PPR players on the planet, of course. So when I look at this matchup, yeah, Tyreek Hill, I build right now. I have 500 lineup run. He is the number one player in overall exposure, and it's really not particularly close. I have him in over 45% of those builds when I just let the computer do its thing. So I can tell you he will be a core lineup play over on DK this week for sure.
Yeah, Meg, I called it. I don't know if it was a show I did with you. I said, listen, when we get to this game-by-game preview, Mike McClure is going to be all over Tyreek Hill. Let me ask you this, Mike, Meg, before I get to you. Any interest in Jalen Waddle as perhaps a pivot off of Tyreek Hill? Will that be featured in any of your lineups?
I don't think so, but I can look and see about 4%. So 20 of the 500 probably won't get there unless playing more than 20 lineups. I do, however, like the other side a little bit. I actually have Trevor Lawrence as one of my top 5 quarterbacks this week per the Sims. Again, using a lot of data, but I do like it, and it makes a little sense. It's a high-scoring environment. He does have a number of weapons. The team's relatively healthy coming in. So I do have a little bit of interest in Trevor Lawrence, mostly paired with Christian Kirk.
Yeah, Trevor makes a lot of sense. 6,200, a pretty good value. We know we can get it with his legs a little bit too. Meg, any interest in this game? I mean, it's hard to say no, right? It's a 49-point total. We know how dynamic Miami in particular can be. Are you playing any of these players?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's one of the highest totals on the slate. I really like this game. I'm trying to whittle down my quarterback pool, and it's really hard because, both the quarterbacks in this game are very intriguing. So I'm with Mike. I love Tyreek Hill. You'll see a theme throughout this show. I love a lot of receivers, and I'm probably going to have to pay down at other spots. So love Tyreek Hill. I do think if you want to get contrarian and go on the other side, I do think Achane could be high owned too. So if you want to get more contrarian, I don't mind going back to the guy that scored the most rushing touchdowns last year, I believe, or 20 rushing touchdowns. I don't mind going back to Mostert if he seems to be an ownership leverage play. And then one other cheap play I'll throw out. I loved him all best ball season. It would be a risk week one, but week one is where you take some contrarian stands. It will be interesting to see what Jonnu Smith does in this offense. If you want a cheap tight end, I think he could be an interesting low-owned play. But yeah, we haven't seen it yet. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's interesting.
Yeah, there's some people in the chat too, Meg. It's interesting with Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas and Gabriel Davis, all relatively valuable options from a price standpoint. Are you interested in Mike? I'm going to ask you this same question because the chat is into some of these guys. I don't really know how to decide among them, especially when you throw Evan Ingram in the mix. In fact, Evan Ingram might be my favorite, but it seems like a lot to go around. Meg, are you on any of these Jacksonville receivers?
I see how you could make a case for him. And obviously Mike liking Trevor Lawrence, that makes sense. Yeah. But I don't know if I'm going to get to him only because I like so many other receivers, like so many other receivers, and trying to whittle that down. I don't know that I'm going to get to them even in a run back, or don't know that I'll get to the Lawrence stack. So I get the case for it. I don't think I'm going to do it. And I like Ingram, but I do see he's coming with ownership this week. So I think I'll probably go elsewhere if we're at tight end.
All right, Mike. So if you're playing Trevor Lawrence, who are you stacking him with? Is it a double stack? And there is a question about Travis Etienne.
Yeah, so I'll talk about Etienne quickly. I think he's going to be a fantastic play. The reason for it is he possesses so much upside in both the run game and the passing game. If Jacksonville is able to score, he's going to be a clear threat in the red zone. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by some of that too is I think he gets squeezed for ownership. I think it's going to be single digits on him, just because you've got guys like Bijan Robinson, Ken Walker. Walker's cheaper, Bijan's more expensive, but in that range, I don't think it's going to be a super attractive click. So I think he will come in single digits. As far as my stack, though, the primary piece is definitely Christian Kirk is going to be the top option for me, 5,500. I think it's a very fair price point. We've seen the upside with Kirk. It's certainly boom or bust, but when he is booming, he's got 2 touchdown, 70+ yard upside in this kind of a matchup. So that would be my favorite stack with Trevor Lawrence. But Trevor's got enough mobility that I don't mind just the stack with Trevor and Tyreek Hill, frankly.
I was going to say that. I mean, when you have a lot of potential pass catches, that includes Etienne and Evan Ingram, is that a time to potentially, if we think the distribution is going to be thin across the board, to actually have that quarterback standalone and then have the run back with Tyreek? Is this, my question is, because you kind of just said it, is this a good conceptual, in theory, spot to do that?
Yeah, I think it really is. Again, I wouldn't play Trevor Lawrence and not have Tyreek, I guess, is what I'm saying. The only scenario I really want him is the scenario that Tyreek's just going nuts and has, really scored a lot. I don't see the scenario where it's Tyreek's not going nuts and it's all Achane, Mostert, or Waddle doing it. I think it really only happens if Tyreek is really getting loose and this game's really getting high scoring. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to look quickly and see. Yeah, I do have a couple doubles with Kirk and Ingram showing up at the top. A little bit of Brian Thomas. A little bit of Brian Thomas. And all of them have Tyreek, though.
Very interesting. All right, let's go. We spent a good amount of time on that game. We're not going to spend the same amount of time on every game. And Meg, I'm going to start with you. We got the Steelers at the Falcons. It's a 42-point total. This line is moving a little bit, 3.5. Steelers certainly not taking much money on the road here against the Falcons. I think Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, it does look like Warren's going to play. I don't know if that depresses the stock of Najee Harris. Not a super high scoring game. But then again, Mike just said, Bijan Robinson, he's probably going to be a guy that people are going to be looking at. Are you looking at him?
I love Bijan Robinson. And I do want to, as we talked about in the last show we did, do some builds where I flip the build. But I think a lot of my builds will be expensive wide receivers and probably paying a little less at running back. So I don't know that I'll get to Bijan much, but as we talked about, I do want to do a couple of builds where I flip the build. And when I do that, Bijan Robinson would be the guy that I'd pay up for. Now, I don't mind going to Najee as one of those pay down options in this game. I do like him, especially Warren coming off the injury. So I do like Najee this week. And I actually like, even though I've whittled it down and I don't think I'll get to Cousins, I do like both the Falcons pass catchers just because their prices are right. Both Drake London and Kyle Pitts are priced. These were, Drake or London in best ball drafts was going in the end of the first round, early second round. Kyle Pitts is going in the fifth round. And if in the DFS market, they're very undervalued or underpriced this week. So I kind of want to take advantage of that early. And so I definitely think I'll get to some of them this week.
All right, Mike, anybody in this game that you like? Are you on or off Bijan Robinson? And do guys like Drake London or George Pickens or even Najee Kyle Pitts, do they make most of, or I should say some of the builds?
Yeah, definitely heavy here, which is interesting because I actually kind of lean Steelers in the game plus 3.5. So I think we could get a competitive one ultimately. But I do expect the concentration of targets to be relatively narrow for Atlanta. I think it's going to be a lot of the big three in Bijan, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, and they're all priced pretty appropriately. I certainly expect them all to go up. When you look at Drake London and the skill set that he represents, the change offensively that we are expecting in Atlanta this season, he, to me, projects as someone that routinely should probably be about $7,200 with an upside of about $8K. So you're getting him at $6K here in week one. I think it's a great time to speculate. I think that the ownership is going to be there for sure, but I don't think it's quite as high because of that total of 42 and just the connotation around the Steelers having such a strong defense. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if we're coming back here next week talking about how obvious it was that Drake London is a $7,200 player or more. So I will be playing quite a bit of London, and same goes for Bijan. Like, I think it's evident by some of the season-long fantasy, some of the best ball drafts, etc. We are projecting Bijan Robinson to essentially be like that 9K running back, like the running backs that are essentially having 20 plus touches, heavily involved in passing game. So yes, we've been burned by them before. It's a new regime in Atlanta. So I personally think they're just drastically undervalued here, and you kind of can't get away from them too much.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll say for me, I'm going to be off of this game pretty much altogether. Bijan might be a fade for me, but that doesn't mean I so soundly disagree with what you all just said. I'm probably going other places to spend my money. And I will say this, I'm kind of hoping this is a low scoring game. I lean to the under here. I'm kind of hoping that Kirk Cousins, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, who, it does appear to be hobbled, but I think he's okay for Sunday. I'm kind of hoping they are kind of flat so that in week 2 against Philly, we can maybe take advantage of just the community not really being on any Falcons players. Let's move on to Vikings Giants. I actually think this one's kind of interesting with Daniel Jones at 5,400, Sam Darnold at 5,200. We know Justin Jefferson is a dude at 8,400, but I'm not sure how many people are going to get to Justin Jefferson because of where they're paying up in other places and just the fact that Sam Darnold is the quarterback. Malik Neighbors on this team, 5,900 does seem like value. Meg, I'm going to start with you again on this one because I believe you're a Justin Jefferson fan in week 1.
Huge Justin Jefferson fan week 1. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups. I'm seeing that he looks to be coming in right now at potentially low ownership. And that makes me love him even more. We don't have 2024 data yet. So, we got to kind of make these stands early. And I'm making the stand that I believe that Darnold can be efficient in the Kevin O'Connell offense with the best receiver in the league. And I'm going to roll with that. They're also going against, per Sharp Football Analysis, the Giants are ranked the worst or second worst secondary. Giants in Washington are the 2 worst secondaries. You'll see a theme that I'm targeting a lot of receivers against these horrible secondaries, Giants being one of them. So I love Jefferson. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups and some with Darnold too.
Yeah, I find it super, super intriguing. I wonder about the pace of these two teams. Jay Met says, fellas, and ladies in the chat, let's make the likes match the viewership. Hit that like button, please. Absolutely. If you're watching us on YouTube, yes, hit the like button. Also, I just want everybody to know that's listening to the podcast, we've kind of got the DraftKings board up game by game. We're kind of punching in some of the players just so you can kind of see some prices and how much you might have left if you put Justin Jefferson in your lineup with, let's say, a Sam Darnold. All right, Mike McClure, let me ask you this, because I also like Justin Jefferson. I also like Malik Neighbors. Do I just go in on this game because it's only a 41-point total and maybe it ends up shooting out? Like, what's your thoughts on this game in general, and what players do you like? Let me just throw out there, I think Aaron Jones is super sneaky at 6,500. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Jones is sneaky. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to him. If I don't get him, though, we talk about this a lot, especially if I have certain exposure levels that I want to meet. Aaron Jones, to me, projects as someone that if I don't quite get to the field, or really some of that overweight position on him, where I'll probably bet his anytime touchdown prop, just to give me a little insurance on not having enough of them across my portfolio. But when I look at this matchup, I bet the Vikings -1, been on them a lot. It's my favorite play of the week. So far, I'm actually playing the Vikings in survivor leagues, to tell you that. Even the $1,000 plus entry survivor leagues. Extremely risky stance taking a road team like that, but I think it will pay off for me. We will see. As far as pairing him with Sam Darnold, I think it's okay. I don't think it's the week for it. I think that if Sam Darnold goes out there and throws 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, has a great fantasy score, I don't think his price point's likely to move much. He's so close to a guy like Jaden Daniels and Baker Mayfield, who I like a little bit more in that game environment. So I'm probably going to play Jefferson without Darnold. But I am going to play a good amount of Justin Jefferson. As far as Malik Neighbors, I think he's fine. I think he's going to potentially get a little over-owned, just because of the hype, the excitement, the name value that he does carry. I do expect him to be heavily involved in that game plan, though. So I like the Vikings side. I actually like the Vikings defense a little bit as well. I think that they are definitely live to take advantage of some turnover variance. So that's mostly what I'm looking at, mostly just Jefferson and the defense. I love the call on Aaron Jones. I just don't, and probably won't know until game day if I'm actually going to get there. But if I don't get there, or if you guys don't get there out there, I think that the sharp way to play Jones would be an anytime touchdown score.
I absolutely love that. All right. Well, we got to keep it moving. We got to get to the next game. But before we do that, let's hear a message from our partners.
My first hot take of the year. When Sunday football isn't enough.
Dislike that take.
Great take.
That other pregame show will put you over the top.
I'm all in. Let's go viral here.
Every Sunday, all the insight you need on CBS Sports Network.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. My name is Sia Nejad. I'm with Meg and Mike. Don't forget, we've got a fantasy football contest. And if you're not already subscribed, that's going to be in the description. If you're not already subscribed to, you're probably subscribed to this channel, but definitely subscribe to the podcast as well on Spotify or Apple. Let's move along. This one has some interest to me. Meg, I'll start with you on this one again. Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints. It's a 42-point total. We got the Saints favored by about 4 points in this one. You know, Chuba Hubbard is somebody that I think is interesting from a value standpoint at 5,300. Alvin Kamara, I think, is very interesting at 6,700. Those are likely the pieces that I look at, but I don't know if I'm actually going to get there. Are you getting there with anybody in this game?
I'm very similar to you, basically what you just said. I think both those running backs are very viable plays. I think both are going to come with ownership. I don't mind them, though, if it just fits my build. So I'm very open to both those running backs. And I will also say Deontay Johnson is priced very nice for likely the Bryce Young's is going to be Bryce Young's wide receiver 1. So I do like Deontay Johnson as well.
Very much agree on Deontay Johnson. I know when we were doing the show with Sticks Picks, he mentioned Adam Thielen as well. Between the two, I think I would go Deontay there. Any interest in this game, Mike McClure, Saints Panthers?
Not a ton, honestly. I'll play Alvin Kamara for sure. He's definitely in the player pool. I think he's going to be extremely popular. I have him actually projected to be the second most popular player on the entire slate right now. So I think he's going to be extremely popular, but I will still have some. I'm projecting Chuba Hubbard to be extremely popular as well, around top 5 ownership on the slate. So I'm going to be fading Chuba Hubbard personally. I get the interest. I get the upside. However, I still would rather pay to find out. I'd rather see it before I buy in on this Panthers offense personally. It is a very low scoring game environment generally. So I'm going to be fading Chuba Hubbard completely here. The price point, a lot of people like it. But again, week 1, there's some real obvious value out there. The quarterbacks but like when I'm looking at quarterbacks, there's a guy in Jaden Daniels, for example, who, because of his rushing upside, he has QB1 upside. I truly believe he has QB1 upside. He's 5,700. I would rather pay there and pay for someone more interesting in PPR type formats. So, you know, if Chuba Hubbard scores 2 touchdowns and has 70 yards and beats me, that's, so be it at that point, but I'm going to be fading at the current ownership.
Yeah, you don't need to convince me, a Commanders fan, or Meg, a Commanders fan, that Jaden Daniels has QB1 upside. So we'll get to that game. That's an interesting one for those playing the afternoon slate, but apparently for the main slate as well. Again, we'll get to that game in a second. Another game to run through relatively quick. We got the Patriots at the Bengals. Bengals a big favorite in this one. It's 41 in terms of the total. I mean, listen, Ramondre Stevenson probably getting a lot of volume. I still don't think I want to pay the 5,900 there. The Zach Moss, Chase Brown situation, I don't think I want to parse that out in week one. Jamar Chase, 7,800, just now starting to practice. Mike, I'll start with you on this one. Any interest here? In a previous podcast with Derek Brown, Hunter Henry was a name that got brought up as a cheaper tight end at 4,200. Any interest in this game whatsoever?
No, I mean, I'll keep the Bengals and the defense in the player pool for now, but otherwise, yeah, it's for me, it's going to be a total pass on the full slate.
Meg, any thoughts on this one? Anything you like, or do we move on?
I mean, the one thing I'd say is, how do we handle Andre? I can't pronounce his last name. Yoshivas. I think I might have gotten it actually.
I think you might have gotten it.
Okay,
right.
He's minimum price. I don't know. We don't know how much, if any, Chase is going to play. I mean, we need to wait and hear on that news, obviously. But obviously, I think his ownership is going to depend on what the reports we're hearing about Chase playing and how much, or how are you guys handling that? Because that is something that I think is a big question to ask for this
Mike.
game.
Yeah, Meg, that's such a good point. Mike, I want to ask you about that, and maybe just a general thought. If you have any players that are like flat 3K or 3,200 or 3,600 that maybe we should be paying attention to make our lineups work. Is he one of those guys? And for the record, you just brought up Jaden Daniels. Is Luke McCaffrey popping in your model? Or maybe De'Ami Brown does look like Luke McCaffrey's. We'll get to that game. He looks like he's higher in the depth chart. But are there any of those types of guys? And is Andre Ishivas one of them at a flat 3K?
Not currently. Obviously, if we get news that Chase isn't going to play for some reason, then the stance would certainly have to be reevaluated there. I'm not finding a ton of players below 4K that are not punt tight ends that are like truly getting into lineups here for me. So again, I think it's a product of just like I'm going a very specific build in terms of where I'm going at quarterback, and there's just so much value out there that I'm not going to likely find reasons to get there. There's just a number of players that you can get to. I really think the salary cap is pretty soft this week. Yeah. And so I think that those plays, while they could pan out, I think they're mostly unnecessary until we get, real concrete news. And if we were to get concrete news on Chase being out, I would probably play the more expensive Burton at 3,700. But yeah, mostly just going to be off of that game, because if Chase is out, I personally think that you just see an extremely wide distribution of targets to just a number of guys, and the number of possessions where they have to throw to win is maybe not going to be the number that we would like. So for me, this is, like I said, it's going to be a stay away almost no matter what. Even if Chase is out, I'll likely find value in other games.
All right. Speaking of games that are uninteresting, we're going to hit one, and then we're going to hit two games that I know people are extremely interested in. That's Cardinals Bills with a high total and Texans Colts with a high total. We're going to have a lot to say about those two before we get to the 4:00 games. But this one, Titans Bears. I mean, it's kind of a decent total, 44.5. Bears a 4-point favorite. I know a lot of people that like the Titans money line here, Titans +4. I'm probably not betting this one either way, but I don't really see anybody that I like from a DFS standpoint. Meg, I start with you. Anybody you like in this game?
Well, from doing a couple of basketball shows with me this summer, I was all over the Titans as one of my favorite breakout offenses. However, this week against the Bears is not necessarily where I'm looking to jump all over that. I do actually respect this Bears defense and secondary. But I will say that I really, really believe in Brian Callahan and what he can do for this offense. So I don't mind maybe taking some shots on like a skinny Ridley, DJ Moore. Again, I really love so many receivers, and Ridley, DJ Moore are two of them. So I will say I am intrigued by those two receivers, the alpha on the one side, really the alpha on both sides. And so I do think Brian Callahan could find unique ways to use Calvin Ridley, and I kind of want to be early to that, but I don't know that I'm going to get to it a lot.
Yeah, the Ridley play is super interesting because there are going to be those games where he has like the 2 touchdown games and then he's absent for the next 6 games. And this certainly could be that play. Mike, any interest here? I think DJ Moore is interesting. The problem with DJ Moore for me is that he's 6,500 and there's so many other guys I like in the like 62 to 6,800 range. I just know I'm not getting to DJ Moore. Ridley does have my interest, but 20.5 point total, implied total for the Titans. I'm just off this game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm mostly going to be off it as well. Well, yeah, not mostly. I am off of this game. I think DJ Moore is fascinating. I think he's clearly got, again, 2 touchdown upside, a big play upside. I personally, again, I think we can wait and find out, right? I think we can watch a game of the Bears offense, see if we can maybe see something interesting in terms of distribution, because there are a lot of mouths to feed. And you do have a young quarterback who, frankly, is very interested in breaking the pocket as soon as he can, and doesn't necessarily, whether it's wanting to run, not wanting to take hits. I think it'll be interesting to see this offense. So I'm out on the Bears here. The only thing, if you like the Titans but don't have a way to get to them, I think there's one interesting play that could potentially get you paid if the Titans play well, if Calvin Ridley plays well. It would be Will Levis over 1.5 passing touchdowns. You can find that plus 160 for 2 touchdowns for Will Levis. If Will Levis doesn't throw for 2 touchdowns in the game total, it's extremely unlikely that Calvin Ridley is busting you and you needed him even at 3-4% ownership. So if you like that, want to speculate, but don't want to jump in there, I think it's an interesting way to really protect yourself a bit if you really liked it.
Yeah, we told you earlier on the early edge that there's a lot of betting crossover on this show. There's a lot of redraft crossover on this show, a lot of props, a lot of against the spread talk that's just kind of peppered in here. So again, kind of feels like a one-stop shop for the main slate for sure. Meg, I think we did get your opinion on Titans Bears. Yeah, of course we did, because you had the Ridley comment. Let's go to, this is a good one. The next 2 are really good. I'm so intrigued by what we're going to hear here. Thank you, Nada, by the way, on the 1s and 2s behind the glass here, putting up all the graphics, messing around with the DraftKings stuff so we can see the players and the pricings. And of course, he's got it up here. Cardinals are plus 6.5 at the Bills, 48 point total. Kyler Murray is one of my favorite quarterbacks in this game. On this slate. I might be overplaying my hand here. I'm happy to do that. It's DFS. That's kind of what you're supposed to do. Meg, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you like on either side? Are you going to have a lot of investments in this game?
This one's so tough for me because I really kind of want to pay down at tight end to pay up at receiver. But both these tight ends in this game are so intriguing. And if I were to play the quarterbacks in this game, I'd want to stack them with their respective tight ends. So I do love Josh Allen and Kincaid. I do love Kyler Murray and McBride. So I'm honestly struggling because, again, I'm trying to whittle down the player pool, and then I just keep finding more that I like. And this is one of them. This is a high total game. I think both defenses are susceptible, and the Bills are banged up. The Cardinals defense is one of the weaker defenses, or defenses I think we are going to want to target. So I could totally see this being a shootout. I want exposure, but it's hard with so many of the other receivers that I like on this slate. But I do see myself doing definitely a Kyler stack with McBride. But I also don't mind obviously the Josh Allen stack with Kincaid.
I like it. Listen, these tight ends, I don't know which one to play. I know I'm going to be invested in at least one of them, not for all of my lineups, but certainly for some. Mike, how you playing this one, Cardinals, Bills?
Honestly, it looks like I'm not playing it, which is crazy with this total. But it's some of the price points and the unknowns. So I think the Bills, I want to make a comparison to the Chicago Bears right now. I think they're very, very similar in that they brought in different pieces, and I don't think we really understand what this offense is going to look like this year. It's just drastically different with the receivers that they have. You've got Shakir out there, the rookie Keon Coleman. You got Curtis Samuel. You've got the running back who catches passes and James Cook. And of course, you've got Josh Allen, who is a threat with his legs. And the problem with these stacks is Josh Allen obviously is $8,000. So that to me gets a little interesting. And just this environment overall, personally, I'm going to be off of it. I like Shakir. I like some of these other guys. I think you might have better luck betting some of their player props in terms of receptions, receiving yardage, longest reception on a guy like Shakir potentially. But I can't really get there in DFS because I don't feel very confident in some of the projections in terms of volume for some of these guys. So I'm going to mostly be off of this game, it looks like. The only thing that I would consider would potentially be a Bills DST, but just because I don't think anyone's going to play it.
Yeah. This next game, we're not going to go to it yet, but I'm actually considering DSTs in that game for that same reason, that nobody's going to play it. I will say this, the next game we're going to talk about, Texans Colts, I like better than this game. Let me ask you this though, Mike, if I was a big Kyler Murray fan, which I just said I was, and I wanted to pair him with either Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride, which direction would you go and what would be the run back?
It would be McBride. And the bring back,
you don't have to have a bring back. The bring back answer could be, this is one of those situations where you don't have a bring back because we don't exactly know what's going on with you. I was thinking James Cook, but you tell me.
Yeah. I don't mind Cook. The price point's a little crazy to me at 6,900, only relative to the rest of the field, right? So when you look at running backs this week, he's the fourth most expensive running back. He's going to be more than Kamara, more than a lot of those guys in there. I don't dislike it if you really like the game. I'm off the game mostly. So probably Cook or Shakir, just because I think he's got some big upside with the speed element.
Fair enough. Meg, any final thoughts on this game before we transition to Texans Colts?
No, I think we covered it.
All right.
Good. Yeah.
By the way, speaking of covering things, there was somebody asking who got in late to the show asking about the contest. So if you're watching us live, the contest was actually put in the chat by Nada. So you can literally just click on that link. It's $5. But if you're listening to the podcast, it will be in the podcast description. It'll be in the YouTube description as well every show. I also like to tweet it out early in the week. So look out for my tweets and just click on it and just get your entry in there again. $5, the top 20 get paid out. All right. This is a game I really like. Texans, Colts. It's a 48.5 point total. Texans favored by 3. This line has moved a little bit. It was, Texans -1.5, Texans -2. And then I think really largely on account of Anthony Richardson not looking super impressive in the preseason, this thing got up to 3. I happen to like the Colts in this one to cover 3 points. With all that said, Mike, I'm starting with you. If you don't have any interest, or you don't have a ton of interest, if not any, in that Bills game, does that mean a lot of that's going to this game, or are we out on this one too?
We're not out on this one. I'm out on one side of it. I'm out on the Texans. I am not out on the Colts. So I like Richardson quite a bit, pairing him a little bit with Pittman, but a lot of just Richardson on his own. And I like the Colts DST here a little bit too.
That's what I was going to say, Mike, because listen, a lot of people, this is where you can get really kind of creative with defenses, where there's a lot of randomness and variability that comes with defenses, and knowing that, and Meg, I'll go to you in a second, knowing that a lot of people want to play CJ Stroud with Nico Collins, or maybe throw in Mixon. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. You're getting double leverage, right? If the Colts defense hits, you're hitting 2 times, because the CJ Stroud backers, they're and Nico Collins or Tank Dell or whatever it is, they're not getting many points, but also they're also not picking that Colts defense.
Yeah, definitely not going to have. You're not going to see really any exposure on the Colts defense. So yeah, I think that the Texans are a team that'll likely get over-owned a lot this year, at least early, just because of the success they had last year. And CJ Stroud had a phenomenal year, frankly. We'll see if they're able to replicate it, but I want no part of them on week 1 personally, because I think they're going to force some targets to Diggs. I think that the distribution is going to be a little interesting, but I also think the Colts are going to be able to move the football and frankly, eat some clock while doing it.
Meg, I think there's arguments for both sides here. I like the Colts side quite a bit. I'll get into my stack that I love when we do our cheat sheet stuff. What do you like in this game?
Yeah, I like this game in general because we've got a high total indoors. I mean, not that matters this time of the year as much, but high total indoors. Colts played a really fast pace, so a likely fast paced game. I mean, this could really spell shootout, and I want to be on it. So I do love this game in general. I do like Anthony Richardson. I agree with Mike. I don't really see the need to force a stack. Again, I like too many other receivers, so I would actually play Richardson naked. And then I do love the Stroud stacks. Again, you'll see a theme of targeting just terrible secondaries and bad defenses. And the Colts secondary is very susceptible. So, and they've got the weapons to do it. So the horses to do it. So I really love a Stroud Nico stack. If you want to double stack him, you certainly can with either the other Texans receivers or Dalton Schultz. But I really love prioritizing Nico, the alpha in this offense, and starting with a Stroud Nico stack. And I will actually say I get the point on the Colts defense, but I also get the point on targeting the defense to one of the highest owned quarterbacks, and that Anthony Richardson will likely be one of the higher owned quarterbacks. Texans have a much better defense than the Colts, so I'll likely play a good bit of Texans defense. Obviously, probably not in my Richard lineups, but in general.
No, it's a great point. The same point can be made on the Texans side as the Colts side in terms of maybe not a super popular defense that might create double leverage, especially against those lineups that have Anthony Richardson or Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor. Meg, real quick, on the non-Texan defense lineups, any interest in Jonathan Taylor, or you're not interested in paying the $7,800, especially since you probably like Bijan a little bit better?
Yeah, I'm not interested in paying the $7,800 because if I'm going to pay up, it's going to be for Bijan. So you said it perfectly.
Yeah, and Mike, I don't mind tying Jonathan Taylor to the Colts defense, but are we just out on Jonathan Taylor? Too high a price?
Yeah, another candidate for anytime rushing touchdown play. I think that's, the price is high. I do think there's definitely a scenario where he puts up 30 points. But having said that, I want to see it again with Anthony Richardson under center, because I do think that definitely changes red zone looks.
Yeah, I'll say this. I like Anthony Richardson to Michael Pittman. I do think Kylan Granson is really interesting with Jelani Woods out for the year. They still have Mo Alley-Cox. They still have a handful of tight ends they can go to. But if you want to get lucky on a cheap tight end, I think Kylan Granson might be that guy at 2,900. Certainly will make a lot of lineups work. All right, we got to make the afternoon games work, and we're going to do it right after this message from our partners.
It's a Service Academy triple header on CBS Sports Network.
We are back on Fantasy Football today, DFS, and Meg, nobody likes an afternoon slate like you and I like an afternoon slate. So we're not going to talk specifically about the afternoon slate, but just to point it out, there's 4 games. They all have similar totals. I think this is a good time if you've never played just the afternoon slate. I think this is a really good time, especially with a lot of unknown, for you to get your feet wet and play a couple of lineups. Like the main slate, let's be honest, Mike and Meg, you know this just as well as anybody. It can be kind of intimidating to have 12, 13 games on a main slate and have so many different places you can go. 4-game slate, it's like playing shorthanded in poker. The range of hands, it's just less. And you can kind of really experiment with some game theory things. So let's start with the Raiders and the Chargers. This is, again, all these totals are kind of similar in the afternoon. This is a low total. I'm not big on any of these guys. I saw some people in the chat were talking about Zamir White. Certainly don't mind that. But Meg, anything you like in this game?
I actually do. Probably more for the 4 p.m. short slate for the kind of the reasons you mentioned. And like you, I will be doing early only and afternoon only, because I think you can exploit some fun things. And I think because, like you said, the totals in the 4 p.m. window are very similar, that I think you could make some stands here. And I love Davante Adams. He's been crushing the Chargers, and he recently had some comments about, that he does crush the Chargers and kind of pointed to that. So I love Davante Adams in this game. I also maybe want to be early on Herbert and his pass catchers when everybody thinks it's the running game. And I think you can play the running backs on the short slate because they're so cheap. Which one? I don't know, because you have both Dobbins and I'm blanking on the other
Dobbins and Gus Edwards.
Dobbins and Edwards. You have both Dobbins and Edwards, very cheap, but it could be interesting in the 4 p.m. window. I think Justin Herbert could be next to no owned. And so that could be very interesting in the 4 p.m. Not on the main slate for me, but in the 4 p.m. window, I could see myself doing a Herbert to Palmer stack or something along those lines, running it back with Davante.
Yeah, Mike, anything in this game, maybe you want to keep the afternoon slate in mind, but also the main slate, like Ladd McConkey, 4,700. I don't know that we know what his role is going to be precisely in week 1, although I do like his long-term 2024 value. Davante Adams, 7,600. Brock Bowers does look like he's going to play, but a little shaky because of the injury he had in training camp in the preseason. Anything you like in this one?
The Chargers defense will be my top defense of the slate for sure.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I think that the Raiders are definitely live to turn the football over. I also think the Chargers, we kind of expect them to still run the football a little bit. Definitely a slower pace of play, a more old school traditional role, which I think leads this game to be lower scoring, as evident by the total. But I do think the quarterback situation is not great for the Raiders. I think that the situation overall is not great. So Chargers DST by far my biggest play in this one and my top defense on the slate. Don't think I'll get anywhere else. Ladd McConkey, I think, is going to be great in this offense. I think it might take a week or two, but similar thing here, right? When you look at the way DFS works, right? So by the time this game goes off and goes final, it's very likely that contests for next week will already be up and the price is very unlikely to move on McConkey. So I think we'll still, even if he does have a big game or just a fine game that pays off his tag, we're talking about a guy that's still 5K or less going forward. So I'd rather wait and see with a little more information. So for me, it's Chargers DST, and that's it.
Yeah, this is an interesting game. I kind of like the under in this game. Let's see. Justin Gurovich says this is going to be a 13-10 slog of a game. I don't disagree with that. Too Shiesty 1X says Raiders are better. I mean,
they might be.
That's the thing is I don't know that I disagree with that either. I like the +3 there at that key number. All right, let's go on to the next game. I think we pretty much covered that. This next game, Meg, I am so interested in. Afternoon slate and otherwise, because I just think there's so much value, particularly on the Seattle Seahawks side. We got the Broncos, Seahawks, Broncos, a 6-point dog. For the record, if you're not a member of Sportsline, I don't know what you're doing, but I did put out a prop. I'll just give it out right now. Bo Nix over 19.5 completions. I put that prop out, 2 days ago. It's up on Sportsline. But Meg, I like Geno Smith. I think he's interesting, but I really like both DK Metcalf and JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, at 4,900 for both of those guys, 6,200 and 4,900, and then Kenneth Walker at 6,100. To me, this is a team that I think people are underappreciating offensively. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I do like the Seahawks in this game, and I love all the plays you mentioned. I mean, I was surprised that JSN's price was so low.
Yeah.
And so I'm very intrigued by that. Kenneth Walker, I just love Kenneth Walker. There's been tons of good coach speak all off season. So I want to go back to him in this game against a Broncos, run defense that is bad. He's going to be high owned, but he's the chalk play that I think is absolutely worth it. So I love Kenneth Walker this week.
Mike, do you agree? Like, again, it's a relatively low total at 41.5, 42 in some places. But I think this is one of those games that could land on 50. I think Bo Nix can be efficient in the passing game and the running game can be decent. I think Geno Smith and company can be very good. And the reason I haven't mentioned Tyler Lockett, by the way, is it's sounding like he's going to be on the field week 1, but just listening to him talk about his health status, he doesn't seem super confident that he's going to be a full go. So that just, to me, the Metcalf and JSN value go even higher, maybe even Kenneth Walker. Are you in or out on this game?
I'm in on the game. I'm not going to game stack it. While I do like Knicks, I'm going to wait a little bit there. Mm-hmm. I do like the Seattle side a lot, though. Kenneth Walker is going to be my second highest owned player behind Tyreek, it looks like. So like that. Geno actually falls in my top 5 quarterbacks. So I like Geno to JSN. JSN value going to be significant. Individually, I think that he takes a relatively big step forward individually this season. So I'm very interested there. And I would pair him with Geno. I'm also okay with a full-on capture all Seahawks exposure, which would be Geno, Walker, and JSN in the same lineup. I think that it can get there and can work just because of the price points. It probably isn't something I would recommend, in week 7 to 10 when the price points have gone up on these guys. But week 1, I think that there's a lot of value. Again, JSN, Walker, and Geno just essentially capturing exposure to most of the scoring for Seattle.
Yeah, Justin Gurovich says JSN only 4,900. Wow. I mean, it does seem low. I mean, part of the reason for that is because when the pricing came out, Lockett, it's on this team and it's probably going to be on the field week 1, but it does seem like, he hasn't gotten a lot of work in, and JSN is a guy that they look like they're going to feature. So music to my ears that both of you like the Seattle side. I wanted to touch on one other thing, Mike. The Seattle defense, with Bo Nix being a rookie quarterback, he does get the ball out fast. He is very efficient, but this game with the 6-point spread, it could go a little sideways. Or is a Kenneth Walker Seattle D correlation in play?
Yeah, I think the correlation's definitely in play there. I'm going to elect to go to other defenses, but there's definitely nothing wrong with that correlation.
Okay, let's move on to the next game. For those of you that are new to this show, we're going to do a cheat sheet at the end of the show and talk about some of our favorite plays, which you can fade or follow if you want. I mean, the meat and potatoes of this show is what we're doing right now, but we do a cheat sheet, each of us at the end, with our favorite chalk plays, chalk fades, contrarian plays, favorite stacks, things of that nature. And again, I'll say it for just one last time. If you are new to the show, please type into Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Fantasy Football Today, DFS, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're following us on audio and, of course, video right here. All right, Commanders, plus 3.5 at the Buccaneers. I believe this line opened at like 4 or 4.5 because Meg, I thought you and I might have talked about this a couple of months ago where we were like, that line seems a little too high. Like, even though it's a rookie quarterback going into Tampa, I like the number of plus 4.5 or plus 4. Now it's down to 3.5, 43.5 point total. The number's creeping up a little bit. Any interest in this one, Meg?
Oh, definitely. And as Washington fans, I'm actually coming at it from the other side. I'm pretty appalled about how bad our defense still is, especially the secondary. It's really just taking advantage of that. And fun fact, exactly 10 years ago, I got my first DFS win, angry at Washington, and just did a Washington spite lineup, loaded up against them. That's where my first DFS win came. And I might go back to it with a massive Buccaneers stack. Love Baker, love Evans, love Godwin. You can play Otten. You can do whatever you want. I actually don't like Rachaad White as much because he's coming in high ownership. I know the game script could work his way, but that's where we're actually stronger up front with Washington. We are horrible. The secondary is horrible. Target the Washington secondary in every format you can. And I will be doing so with Baker, Godwin, Evans. I especially love Evans because he's coming at likely low ownership. So I don't think I'll have a lineup this week without a Buccaneer.
Godwin at 5,800 certainly speaks to me. And because of all the value in the 5K range, it's not like he's going to be super chalky, especially since this game, even though the total's creeping up, it's not some super high total by any means. Mike McClure, you mentioned you like Jaden Daniels, so I'm curious, A, how you're playing him, and do you agree with Meg that there's some real good value on the other side of the ball?
By far the game I have the most exposure to this week. Love both sides in this one. I love Daniels. I love Baker Mayfield. 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks for me this week. Again, for obvious reasons, I think picking on that Washington secondary. And then Daniels, I think he's going to be a massive upgrade to what Washington's had recently. And he's got the mobility, which I think we see on display early and often here. So I'm playing Daniels on his own, but I'm heavily stacking him, mostly with Terry McLaurin. Chris Godwin is the number 3 owned player for me. It's going to be Tyreek Hill, Kenneth Walker, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, just extreme value. He is just the 20th most expensive wide receiver on the slate at DraftKings this week. I think extremely high floor. We'll talk about upside. I don't necessarily know that I need a ton of upside at that price point with the floor. Love Cade Otton at tight end a bit as well, and some of those Baker doubles and or as a bring back with Daniels. And let's see. I got a little bit of Evans, a little bit of White, and a little bit of Brian Robinson Jr. actually.
Interesting. So, Meg, I'm going to go back to you before we get to our final game of the afternoon slate. But if somebody in the chat, it's really just me asking because I want to know. But if somebody in the chat were like, okay, so you like Jaden Daniels, you like Terry McLaurin, that makes sense. Terry McLaurin at 5,600 does seem like scream value, obviously. Who's the run back? Is it just like, what would be your favorite way to play this? Maybe you stack it with 2 guys, or maybe you bring it back with 2 guys. Like, how does the primary stack look in this game?
So yeah, there are Washington players. I did mention Brian Robinson on one of our early look shows. His price is right. I mean, I do think Washington doesn't really have a wide receiver too. So you and I both know that very well. So I do think Eckler is intriguing. He could get, peppered some targets. It's just his price is a little higher and makes me a little uncomfortable. So I more am leaning towards Brian Robinson Jr. As Mike said, Terry McLaurin, and the big one for me is Zach Ertz. I mean, he's old. He grosses people out that, he's old and washed. Not necessarily, especially early in the season and in a Cliff Kingsbury offense. So let's go to him early in the season. And Cliff loves him, and I think Jaden Daniels loves him too. I think he could be a nice outlet for a rookie quarterback with a Todd Bowles defense that could bring a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take. Mike, anything to add on to that before we get to Cowboys Browns?
No, just it'll be a game that I'm heavily exposed to. I like Meg. I think we're all going to have one player from that game at a bare minimum in a lot of lineups.
This is why you come to this show. You're not hearing everything you heard on all the other shows. No, like not to say those takes aren't good or whatever, but like we talked about this, Meg, when you and I were on 2-3 weeks ago. You get sort of some of the same takes, but a lot of different takes, a lot of types of different roster construction, which is truly how you succeed in DFS. So I'm really happy to hear that some of these games that maybe not a lot of people are on, we are on, for better or for worse. Cowboys, Browns. We've got another low total, 41. Cowboys a 2.5-point dog here. I had peddled about a month ago that I thought Deshaun Watson was an interesting contrarian play because we don't exactly know where his shoulder is, and maybe his arm is looking good. Obviously, the preseason, he's looked pretty flat. Jerome Ford at 5,500, obviously speaks to a lot of people as a value. Amari Cooper, 6,400, I think is interesting. I am probably now off this game. Maybe I'll have a lineup or two with Deshaun Watson and Amari just to have that lineup out there. But Mike, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on this game?
I'll play a lot of Jerome Ford. He'll be my direct pivot from Chuba Hubbard. I'm projecting about half the ownership currently. I don't really want much to do with Carolina just yet. And Cleveland, I actually think that if they get even average quarterback play from Deshaun Watson, I think they're going to be able to put some points on the board, move the football, and it's his backfield right now, in my opinion. So I really like the value on Ford at 5,500.
Yeah, Jeffrey Lightsey, Meg, says Dak and CD ownership may be worth it to take a shot on. Like people understand the Cleveland Browns splits, right? They know they're great at home and they're not very good on the road. Well, this is a home game for Cleveland. And I think stock is generally down on Dallas, even though people love CD. People still like Dak Prescott. The running game, you don't exactly know what's going on there, like Rico, Ezekiel Elliott, Deuce Vaughn, Dalvin Cook. Like I think it's going to be Rico long-term personally, but I do think CD and Dak are going to be under-owned. Your thoughts on that?
I do think they're going to be under-owned, but, it could be for good reason. The Browns are not necessarily a defense you want to mess with. I had the most ownership to the Cowboys probably across the board in best ball. Dak is my highest owned quarterback. So I think season long, I love the Cowboys, but in this game, I'm not really targeting, though I do think in the 4 p.m. slate, again, for some ownership stands in the 4 p.m. slate, a Dallas running back taking a shot on Zeke or Dow could be very interesting. But I agree with you guys on Ford. Love Ford.
All right. I think it's time to get to our cheat sheet. And then Mike, after the cheat sheets, I just want you to touch on Showdown for tonight in case anybody wants to get their feet wet there. All right, let's start with Mike. We're going to start with your cheat sheet. A couple of familiar names that we just talked about. What is your top stack?
It's going to be Jaden Daniels to McLaurin for me, but I really would just broaden that. It's that game, right? So it's mostly that game, but I do love Jaden Daniels. I'll be playing him a lot with Terry McLaurin. So top stack for me is the Commanders. All
right, and then let's go chalk play and chalk fade.
Ken Walker is going to be the chalk play here. Look, he's going to be very popular. It's just an obvious misprice in this particular matchup. You look at game script against a rookie quarterback at home, it's likely that they have a 1-2 score lead for the majority of the second half. So I think it's a really good game script. And the fade, we talked about a little bit, Chuba Hubbard. I think he's fine. I think he's a very talented player, frankly. I just don't love the system that he's playing in and the ownership that comes with it. So I'll play Jerome Ford over him, but that'll be my fade.
And I'll mention that negative game script is part of the reason I like the Bo Nix completions prop of over 19.5. Your value play, Mike.
I'll go Chargers defense. I know we typically give skill position players there, but I'm going to be on the Chargers defense to the point of most of my lineups having that. So I'm going to give the value play there. I think the value is extremely strong on the Chargers DST.
And do you have a contrarian play quite yet? I know we don't exactly have a full scope of ownership on a Thursday morning relative to, let's say, a Friday or a Saturday, but where are you at on a contrarian play?
It's my top stack is relatively contrarian in that
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people are going to play Jaden Daniels as many as they should. But I'll give Cade Otton tight end for the Tampa Bay Bucks. I think that the Bucks will get a little ownership, but I think it's going to be heavily concentrated on Rachaad White and Chris Godwin. So I'm going to go Cade Otton here. I'm projecting probably 3 to 5% on.
Okay, let's go to Meg. Let's go top stack, chalk play, chalk fade.
Okay, so I'll start with a top stack. It's Stroud, Nico Collins. Again, we talked about it. Could be fast paced and a potential shootout. And I want to be early that and targeting the bad Colts defense. And then I'm right with Mike on chalk play. Kenneth Walker, for me, absolutely worth it at that price and game script. I want to be in on that. That is good chalk. Chalk fade for me is Rachaad White. It's one of the few people in this game I am fading. He's looking to come at very high ownership. And so he is one of the few people in this Washington Bucks game that I'm fading. And then value is actually in the same game is the guy I just mentioned. Good old Zach Ertz in a Cliff Kingsbury offense.
How about a contrarian play?
Well, it's 2 contrarian stacks, and you could do it on the 1 p.m., 4 p.m. if you'd rather do that. Or if you want to take a stand in the main slate, it's Darnold to Justin Jefferson and Baker to Mike Evans. You have a cheap quarterback with an elite receiver. And here's the deal. Both stacks are going to come in really pretty low owned. I think I'm seeing low ownership on both the quarterbacks, but more importantly, I'm seeing very low ownership on both of these elite top receivers. And so I love a Darnold JJ stack, and I love a Baker Mike Evans stack.
All right, I'll give out my stack. I'm sticking with my guns here on Anthony Richardson to Michael Pittman. I don't feel great about paying up for Pittman, but I don't think a lot of people will feel great about paying up for Pittman, which is part of the reason I like the stack all the more. I do think if you wanted to run Richardson naked, or maybe with Kylan Granson, just throw in another piece at 2,900, I think that's a fine play. And then I don't know that you need a run back in that game if you're playing it like I'm playing it, but I do think Nico Collins would be the run back there if you were going to do that. My chalk play is going to be Jerome Ford. I certainly agree with Ford and Kenneth Walker. And like you said, Mike, Jerome Ford, maybe not as chalky as somebody like a Chuba Hubbard. So I don't know how chalky that'll be, but there'll be some ownership on Ford. My chalk fade, believe it or not, because I kind of have this blank, but I think I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson. And it's not because I don't like him. It's because I don't think I'm getting to his price because of what I know I'm going to do at receiver and paying up a little bit for my quarterback and guys like Michael Pittman. There's just no way Bijan Robinson is going to be. He might be in 1 or 2 lineups, but he's not going to be in a majority of my lineups. My value play, I mentioned it. I think the chat likes it. JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba at 4,900. I like Seattle in general. I think the stock is a little too low on Seattle. They have Mike McDonald as their, controlling the defense, but don't forget Ryan Grubb from the Washington Huskies controlling the offense. I think that offense is going to be very translatable to the NFL. My contrarian play is going to be Aaron Jones at 6,500. Now, this doesn't mean I'm playing Aaron Jones in every lineup, but I don't need to get over the field, right? I need to play him in, let's say, 4 or maybe 3 out of, 3 out of 15 lineups, even 3 out of 10 lineups, I'll be way over the field at 30%. So, keep in mind what you're doing from a game theory standpoint. You don't have to slam in your contrarian plays to every lineup. Just be over the field on really all your plays, let alone the contrarian one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the main part of the show, but we can't exit yet. Like normally, we're not going to have a showdown game to talk about. Well, we will, because we'll do this show on a Thursday. So we'll figure out how we're going to touch on Showdown. But this is the opening game. Mike, I got to ask you, if somebody is kind of new to Showdown and they're like, I want to play tonight, it's the first game of the season. I don't want you to give a tutorial, but I just want to know how you're approaching it from a roster construction standpoint. Ravens, Chiefs, Showdown.
So the biggest thing to note, number one, salary cap. Do not feel like you have to use it all. I will routinely have lineups that leave $3,000 to $4,000 of salary cap on the table as you're building for very specific scenarios generally. And don't forget about defense and kickers, especially early in the season. If people grinding Showdown slates after week 10, everyone kind of already knows the drill at that point. A lot of new money, a lot of new faces playing DFS in weeks 1, 3, 4, 5, somewhere around that range. You don't use kickers in traditional DFS anymore, so they often get left out. But we have 2 of the best in the game. They're very expensive tonight, but 2 of the best in the game. The favorite thing we talked about a few times last year, go look at Harrison Butker, for example. We'll look at his game log here, right? From week 17, he scored 24 fantasy points in that game. Now go look at wide receivers that are $4,600 tonight and show me how many of them have 24 points on their game log. But against San Francisco in the Super Bowl, 15. Against AFC Championship game against Baltimore, only 7. But again, go look at 7 fantasy points in that range. 10 points game after that, 14 against Miami, just routinely double digits. So do not be afraid of kickers. Be smart with some of the correlations there. And just a couple sample builds that I'll be looking at here. Pacheco captain paired with Chiefs DST and Zay Flowers as they bring back there. Thought process is the correlation with Pacheco scoring rushing touchdowns, Chiefs defense. Chiefs defense is playing well. Zay Flowers is likely getting peppered with targets. Rashee Rice, captain. Mahomes throwing to him. Derrick Henry on the other side. If Rashee Rice is getting there, it's likely through sheer volume around the line of scrimmage. They're likely having trouble moving the ball with the ground game. So you want those correlations. And then for me, Xavier Worthy in the captain paired with Mahomes. I like this one with Justin Tucker as a build there.
Tell me why Justin Tucker fits in a Xavier Worthy, Patrick Mahomes build.
So I don't expect Worthy to be the extreme standout option. I think a lot of the volume is still going to go to Rashee Rice, and Pacheco is going to be heavily involved. In this scenario, it's one that we've likely hit a deep shot to Worthy. I'm talking, 50, 60 yard touchdown pass. And in that game script, I think it's one that the game is ultimately still competitive. And the competitive game is one where I want Justin Tucker. We know he's got 60 plus yard range. And I do think Harbaugh will be relatively conservative in terms of taking points and keeping this game within one score if they can. So I think that those correlations make a lot of sense.
Meg, you want to do this every Thursday at 11 o'clock?
Absolutely. This was a blast. I love it.
Mike, you want to do this every Thursday at 11 o'clock?
Let's do it.
Everyone in the chat, if you want to do this every Thursday at 11 o'clock, put yes in the chat and indulge me. That was so fun. We get to do this for the next 17 regular season weeks and into the playoffs. Again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We tried to cover as much ground in an hour as we possibly could. We might try to shorten this up to like 50 minutes, get you in and out of here on the next one. But we had a lot to cover on this very first show with just the three of us. A lot of yeses in the chat. Thank you. See, you didn't have to do that, but I absolutely appreciate it. Vern, Grey Goose, Jeffrey, RT the Brand, Taylor, thank you so much. DT in Phoenix, Justin, really appreciate everybody being in here. Hopefully you can be in here every single time we do this at 11 o'clock on Thursdays. And if not, if you miss a show, that's okay. We got the podcast coming at you as well. We got a lot to talk about every single Thursday. Thank you for joining us on this one. It's day 0 of NFL. Enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy the game tomorrow night. And the Sunday slate will be right back here. It'll be me, Meg Shoup, Mike McClure, 11 o'clock Thursday for week 2. It's kind of fun to say that out loud, referring to week 2. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS.